The air was heavy with the stench of smoke and blood. I stood among my brothers, our breaths fogging in the cold morning. Knight Commander Aldrich spoke, his voice calm but firm, cutting through the unease. "We are all that stands between Corthalon and annihilation. Do not hesitate." Aldrich's eyes burned with fury, his voice a growl beneath his chainmail hood. "Outnumbered or not, I'll carve a path through their ranks." Darian chuckled behind him, shaking his head. "Always the blunt hammer, Aldrich." I stayed quiet, knowing both their courage hid the same fear I felt. The mist wrapped around us, clinging to my armor and muffling every sound. Aldrich moved between us, his presence steadying. "Hold your ground," he said, his voice low but commanding. I gripped my sword tighter, trying to swallow the fear gnawing at me. We had to survive. Before the charge, Aldrich placed his hand on each of us, his gaze steady. No grand speeches, no promises of glory, just a silent understanding. We drew strength from his calm and soothing spirit. In that moment, words weren't needed. We were a single force bound by duty and survival. Knight Commander Aldrich strode past us, his armor glinting faintly in the gloom. "Hold the line," he said, his voice steady. "The warriors of the Black Banner can fall. Together we'll see the dawn." Aldrich's voice rang out, sharp and unwavering as he drew his sword. It wasn't a speech, just a single action that cut through the tension. No one said a word. We all knew what came next. The time for waiting was over. Battle was upon us. I closed my eyes for a moment, gripping my sword tightly. "If this is my last breath, let it not be in vain," I whispered to the heavens. There was no answer, only the weight of what lay ahead. The silence before the battle was heavier than any armor we wore. Each of us stood lost in our own thoughts, carrying the weight of what was to come, yet bound by the same unspoken resolve. The ranks stood still, the weight of the coming storm heavy on all. Silence bound us together, each warrior bracing for what the next moment would bring. Some prayed, others steadied their hands on their weapons. In the silence, an unspoken truth united us. We would fight, and many of us would fall. We would fight, and many of us would fall, but none would turn back. The battle was inevitable, as was its cost. The earth itself seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with dread. Each drumbeat was a harbinger of death, and we stood on the edge of oblivion. Around me, everyone prepared in silence. I tightened the straps on my armor, its weight pressing against my chest like the gravity of what was to come. Yet my thoughts raced. Would I be strong enough? My hand lingered on the hilt of my sword, searching for reassurance that I knew I would never find. Heads bowed, we braced for the storm, not in surrender but in defiance, knowing the day might claim us, yet refusing to falter. Knight Commander Aldrich adjusted his chainmail, his movements steady and precise. He spoke no words, yet his focus was unshaken. In his calm, I saw what we all lacked, a resolve unbroken by fear. Kaelin's eyes met Aldrich's. For a moment, everything fell silent. Then, Kaelin's battle cry echoed. He drew his sword. We paused for a second, then charged forward together. One step closer to death, one step closer to claiming victory. I touched the ground with my hands. It was cold and hard. Each fingertip carried the weight of the past and future. Every moment of battle here marked another loss, as my hands held the memory of what was gone. Darius rode past, and a chill ran through me. We moved forward, each step heavier. The battle was near, and uncertainty gripped my heart. Darius's eyes were distant, as if he knew the battle's cost. The air was thick with tension, each step heavier than the last. Blood and sweat filled the air, and fear gnawed at us. We marched toward inevitable loss, knowing not all would return. Horses, wars, migrations, silent steps that change the face of the world with endless sorrow. Each new land is an echo of a lost past, each battle the forgotten destiny of a people. Under Darius's command, the horses moved and the ground trembled. As we advanced toward the battlefield, the tension within me grew with each step. We were slowly drawing closer, but death was not yet in sight. My heart pounded, breath shallow, but we moved forward, unyielding. Each step was a silent promise not to turn back. The horizon darkened, the air thick with the stench of impending Everything became real in an instant, and death felt closer than survival. In the eyes of my comrades, there was a void shifting between fear and The true face of war was drawing closer, and I realized how far we were from the hope I once felt. The noise of the battle grew louder, but for a moment, everything stopped. The silence within everything amplified the echo inside me, a relentless whisper of thoughts that refused to fade. Each strike echoed through me, the weight of battle pushing us further into darkness. Faces blurred with sweat and blood, brothers and strangers alike, fighting for survival. Amid the chaos, I glimpsed Aldrich, his presence unshaken. "Hold fast," he commanded, his voice cutting through the storm. But even his steady hand couldn't stop the tide. As the fight wore on, I could feel the toll, the ache of loss, the sting of blood, the gnawing fear of what might come next. Yet still, we pressed forward. But then, in a split second, it happened. Aldrich's sword fell, his body crumpling beneath the weight of fate. The battlefield fell silent for a heartbeat. Time itself seemed to stop. I stumbled, the weight of his fall hitting me harder than any blow. The line broke, and in the shattering silence we realized this war was far from over, and everything we fought for had changed.